Very good afternoon, everybody. And in this lecture, we are going to talk about post-colonial study of Midnight's children. And while we look at post-coloniality in Midnight's children, we are well aware that post-coloniality has many aspects. For example, post-coloniality gets reflected in the narrative style or narrative devices used by Salman Rushdie, in the frame narration, how he has used all those narration, and how he is trying to make a hybrid narrative with the help of postmodern devices, mingled or chutneyfied with magic realism. And again, as if something is pickled into those things with the sense of Indian oral narratological methods. So all those things come together when we discuss post-coloniality. As an overall frame, we can say all these things become part of hybridity, which is a very central concept of post-colonial studies. Hybridity, which Homi Bhabha is speaking about. So those aspects we have touched upon slightly. We have studied characters also, and through post-structuralist lens we have tried to see the characters and the duality in their characters, or hybridity in the characters also. But in this class, we want to see these two concepts of post-coloniality, that is nation and hybridity. Nation and hybridity. So how this novel deal with the idea of nation, and how it works on this Homi Bhabha's concept of hybridity, that we want to see. We are well aware this idea that Salim is India, India is Salim, is a very well-known fact about this novel. So right from the beginning, the way the narrator, our narrator, that is Salim, tries to tell his story to us, the way he narrates and the way he connects himself, with India, that also is a very well-known fact, and we have seen that in the narrative. For example, the very beginning of the novel, book 1, the perforated sheet, the title which goes here. I'm sharing the screen. Are you able to see? Yeah. Okay, fine. Yeah. So it says that the very first sentence, I was born in the city of Bombay once upon a time. No, that won't do. There is no getting away from the date. So I was born in Dr. Narlikar's nursing home on August 15th, 1947. So again, we quickly get connected with the idea of India. India's freedom or independence, 15th August 1947, 0 hours. So what time? It was night, more precisely on the stroke of midnight. On the stroke of midnight, the words borrowed from Jawaharlal Nehru's famous speech, which was given at this moment. So clock hands join palms in peaceful greeting as I came. So is India's arrival at independence and his is being tumbled forth into the world. They get connected with the idea. And later on also he writes that I had been mysteriously handcuffed to history. My destinies insolubly chained to those of my country. My country. So that is, these are ample textual evidence to see that how Salim's narrative is connected with India, and how Salim becomes India and India Salim. So there is that concept of nation that needs to be seen in a proper perspective. To understand this concept of nation, let us see this poem. This poem has some very interesting words, and because of that, this poem becomes quite significant to understand this concept of nation that we want to see here. So we are trying to see nation, and we have connected that nation. India is connected very much with with Salim, who is the prime narrator of Midnight's Children. And now we want to see the post-colonial notion of nation. how do we see this word nation? Yeah. So we are going to see in this point, these points we are going to refer, but we'll start with the first one, that is Bhagwat Rawat's poem, and few lines from a very long poem. It's a very long poem from where we'll read few lines, so that what Ernest Renan says in What is a Nation, or how Timothy Brennan tries to say about rise of European nationalism, or the very idea about nation and nationalism is connected with European imperialism, which is said by Timothy Brennan and Ernest Renan. They get connected. Or even when Homi ke Bhabha in 1990 writes about nation and narration, those all ideas perhaps will get more clear in this poem. Some of the lines of this poem, Desh Ek Raag Hai by Bhagwat Rawat. So मैं देश के नाम संदेश देना चाहता था, राष्ट्र के नाम नहीं. So we get the duality, देश and राष्ट्र. Sometimes we use alternative word, alternative synonyms. They seem to be synonyms, देश and राष्ट्र. But this poem tries to differentiate that there is a gap between देश and राष्ट्र. There is a deep chasm. There is a kind of a threshold. Threshold means umber. There is a kind of a threshold. Umber, Gujarati word. Umbro. So there is a threshold between these two. And the way in language we try to use synonymously these two words, but no, it is not so. That is what this poem tries to say. And that is what we have to understand when we see the concept of nation or nationalism in post-colonial discourse also. देश के नाम राष्ट्र के नाम नहीं. देश के नाम, मजेदार बात यहाँ है कि देशवासियों जैसे आत्मीय संबोधनों से प्रारंभ होने वाले ये संदेश जो लाल किले से प्रधानमंत्री 15 अगस्त को दिया करते हैं, दैट संदेश, ये संदेश देश को भूलकर राष्ट्र कहते नहीं थकते. राष्ट्र की मजबूती, राष्ट्र की गरिमा, राष्ट्र की संप्रभुता, राष्ट्रोत्थान जैसे विशेषणवाची अलंकारों से मंडित ये आत्ममुग्धता और आत्मश्लाघा के उदाहरण बन के रह जाती है. So the tone of the poem gets very clear that राष्ट्र is something problematic. राष्ट्र is something problematic definition. मुझे कुछ समझ में नहीं आता, मेरी उलझन बढ़ती ही जाती है कि देश के भीतर राष्ट्र है या राष्ट्र के भीतर देश. दोनों में कौन किससे छोटा, बड़ा, सर्वोपरि या गौण है. इस विवाद में न पड़े तो भी दोनों एक ही है, यह मानने का मन नहीं करता. फिर भी सुविधा के लिए मान ही ले तो देश का पर्याय राष्ट्र कैसे हो गया. देश का पर्याय राष्ट्र कैसे हो गया. पर्याय, दिस लैंग्वेज सिनोनिम, हाउ इट बिकेम. अर्थात देश में सेंध लगाकर काबा राष्ट्र घुस आया. इसका पुख्ता कोई ना कोई कारण और इतिहास होगा ही. See how this राष्ट्र, the word has encroached the space of Desh, how it has colonized the very concept of Desh. That is what it says. अर्थात देश में सेंध लगाकर काबा राष्ट्र घुस आया, इसका पुख्ता कोई ना कोई कारण और इतिहास होगा ही, पर मेरा कवि मन आज तक इसको स्वीकार नहीं कर पाया. और यदि इसका उल्टा ही मान ले कि सबसे पुराना राष्ट्र ही है, तो हजारों सालों में कहां गायब हुआ पड़ा था ये राष्ट्र. राष्ट्रों की कहानियां कौन सुनाता है. अब आप ही बताइए कि क्या कोई ठीक बता सकता है कि कब देश की जगह राष्ट्र और राष्ट्र की जगह देश कहा जा सकता है. हम देश का इतिहास और भूगोल पढ़ाते हैं. सन 47 में हमारा देश आजाद हुआ था. मैं भारत देश का नागरिक हूं. ऐसे सैकड़ों वाक्य पढ़ते पढ़ाते बीत गई उम्र. जब जहां तक आंखें फैलाई दूर दूर तक देश ही देश नजर आया, राष्ट्र कहीं दिखा नहीं, राष्ट्र कहीं दिखा नहीं। अपने अपने घर गांव लौटते हैं लोग तो एक दूसरे से यही कहते हैं ना कि अपने देश जा रहे हैं, अपने देश जा रहे हैं। और ऊपर कही गई बातों में से देश की जगह राष्ट्र रखकर कोई बोलकर तो देखे। राष्ट्र राष्ट्र कहते कहते जुबान न लड़खड़ाने लगे तो मेरा नाम बदल देना, भगवत रावत लिखते हैं। वही एक वाक्य में 10 बार भी आए देश, वही वही एक वाक्य में अगर 10 बार भी आए देश तो मीठा ही लगेगा शहद की तरह, शहद की तरह। राष्ट्र ही सर्वोपरि है तो एक ही राष्ट्र के भीतर, एक ही राष्ट्र के भीतर कई राष्ट्रीयताओं की धारणा से आज भी मुक्त नहीं हुए आप। व्यर्थ गई हजारों वर्षों की यात्रा आपकी, बर्बर तंत्र से प्रजातंत्र तक, बार्बेरिज्म, बर्बर तंत्र से प्रजातंत्र डेमोक्रेसी तक की। तो फिर आइए जाइए वापस अपने अपने राष्ट्रों में। तो फिर देयर इज अ टोन ऑफ एंगर इन द पोएट एंड सेज, तो फिर जाइए वापस अपने अपने राष्ट्रों में, लौट जाइए अंधेरी खाइयों गुफाओं में। Now it means that the concept of राष्ट्र is something like अंधेरी खाइयों गुफाओं में। यही तो चाहते हैं, यही तो चाहते हैं आज भी नए चेहरों वाले आपके पुराने विस्तारवादी माई बाप, that is the government, that is the government। पुराने विस्तारवादी they were European masters, they were European masters। Now ये नए चेहरे वाले, ये नए चेहरे वाले आपके पुराने विस्तारवादी इंपीरियलिस्ट माई बाप कभी जो नेशन का सिद्धांत लेकर आए थे और बढ़ाते रहे अपना साम्राज्य। सो हु केम, दैट इज व्हाट रेनन एंड टिमोथी ब्रेनन सेज, यूरोपियन मास्टर्स, यूरोपियन इंपीरियलिज्म, कभी जो नेशन का सिद्धांत लेकर आए थे और बढ़ाते रहे अपना साम्राज्य, अपनी कॉलोनीज। मैं फिर कहता हूं कि मैं किसी शब्द और किसी नाम का अपमान नहीं कर रहा, केवल उस मानसिकता, मेंटल एटीट्यूड, मानसिकता की तरफ संकेत कर रहा हूं जो अपनी कुलीनता के दंभ में अपने ही देश में अपने ही वर्चस्व का अलग राष्ट्र हो जाना चाहती है और धीरे धीरे सारे देश को इकहरा राष्ट्र, इकहरा मीन्स वन, सिंगल, सिंगल वन, इकहरा राष्ट्र बनाना चाहती है। Now people may say that what is problem if one rashtra becomes one, then there is, but there is a problem, there is the problem that is very important in post-colonial discourse to understand that oneness of thing is problematic। सारे देश को इकहरा राष्ट्र बनाना चाहती है। आज भी 21वीं सदी में ज्ञान विज्ञान सब एक तरफ रख कर ताक में रक्त की शुद्धता, see the purity of blood, the very idea of purity, against that is hybridity, against this purity is the concept of hybridity। so ज्ञान विज्ञान सब एक तरफ रख कर ताक पे रक्त की शुद्धता, पवित्रता की दुहाई देकर भोले भाले लोगों को जिन गुफाओं में ले जाकर जिंदा दफन कर देना चाहते हैं वे, इतिहास गवाह है उन गुफाओं से निकलने में सदियां बीत जाती है। So one who says oneness, purity, रक्त की शुद्धता, पवित्रता, these are very problematic discourses। From all this thing we have took a long time to come out, and how it is compared, they all are गुफाओं, अंधेरी गुफाओं। In says के उसमें वो जिंदा दफन करना चाहते हैं हमें, वो that is that power, political power। इतिहास गवाह है उन गुफाओं से निकलने में सदियां बीत जाती है। यह मानसिकता देश की बहुरंगी संस्कृति, बहुरंगी, मल्टीपल, प्लुरालिटी, कल्चरल प्लुरालिज्म, and when cultural pluralism comes together, what we get is hybridity। So nation and hybridity, how both these concepts are taken quite interestingly by this poet, by this poet। So if we understand this poet in terms of hybridity and nation, then understanding that post-colonial definitions of the word becomes very easy। देश की बहुरंगी संस्कृति को पहले राष्ट्र की संस्कृति कहकर इकहरा, वन, सिंगल बनाती है, फिर देश को एक तरफ फिर देश को एक तरफ फेंक सांस्कृतिक राष्ट्रवाद. सांस्कृतिक राष्ट्रवाद. Many people use this word with sense of pride. ઘણા લોકો ગર્વથી આ બોલે છે કે અમે ગર્વ है हमारे सांस्कृतिक राष्ट्रवाद पर. मैं सांस्कृतिक राष्ट्रवादी हूं. That is what many people say with sense of pride. Now this poet has a problem with this concept. सांस्कृतिक राष्ट्रवाद का नारा लगाती है, मैं किसकी कसम खाऊं, मुझे भाषा के किसी शब्द से चीड़ नहीं है, चीड़ है तो उस मानसिकता से जो शब्दों को मनुष्य के विरुद्ध खड़ा कर देती है. मानसिकता जो शब्दों को मनुष्य के विरुद्ध खड़ा कर देती है, जो सिर्फ मनुष्य को दिए गए नामों से पहचानती है, उनकी जातियों से पहचानती है, उनके रंगों से पहचानती है, उनके कपड़ों से पहचानती है, उनसे कपड़ों से, उनके रंगों से, उनकी जातियों से, उनके नामों से. अमर है, अकबर है या एंथनी है, so उनके नामों से पहचानती है. that मानसिकता, that is what is the problem. देशजो means native people, local people. देशजो citizens. देशजो से बनता है, देशजो से बनता है. Now this is very interesting statement. It means that देश is not made up of land. जमीन से नहीं बनता. देश इंसानों से बनता है, देश लोगों से बनता है, देश जमीन का टुकड़ा नहीं है. उनकी बहुरंगी छटा देशों का इंद्रधनुष बनती है. इंद्रधनुष is a very good metaphor to understand even hybridity also. Even hybridity also, इंद्रधनुष becomes a rainbow. Rainbow becomes a good metaphor. जो सबको अपने अपने आसमान में दिखाई देता है, कौन होगा जिसका मन इंद्रधनुष देखकर इंद्रधनुष जैसा न हो जाए. So if only one color, like if there is only orange color everywhere or only saffron color everywhere, instead of that, if you have Indradhanush, then which color will give us more delight? Only green color, sab kuch hara hara, only green, or only saffron color can give us pleasure, or Indradhanush. People would say that Meghdhanush, Indradhanush, or rainbow becomes very important. मान लिया कि अंग्रेजी के नेशन शब्द के, अंग्रेजी के नेशन, वी आर कमिंग नियर टू अवर कॉन्सेप्ट. नेशन शब्द के लिए हिंदी में फिर से पैदा हुआ राष्ट्र. तो नेशन शब्द में कौन से सुरखाब है, सुरखाब के पर लगे हैं पश्चिमी दुनिया की लगभग सभी भाषाओं में. कितना प्यारा एक और शब्द है, and that is country. country शब्द अर्थात देश. कब और कैसे दबोच लिया, कब और कैसे दबोच लिया. This is that encroaching, the definition of colonialism that we were questioning. कैसे दबोच लिया कंट्री जैसे आत्मी शब्द को नेशन ने. कैसे कंट्री जैसे आत्मी शब्द को दबोच लिया नेशन ने. यह खोज का विषय होना चाहिए. जरूर उसके पीछे कोई बर्बरता छुपी होगी, कोई बर्बरता. We have seen the definition of colonialism, that there is conquest, there is murder, there is killing, there is barbarta, there is barbarism, there is jungliyat, in colonial process. Now here in a language also, that if the word desh is converted into rashtra, if the nation is being colonized by country, then there must be some kind of barbarism also involved in it. यह खोज का विषय होना चाहिए. उसका जरूर उसके पीछे कोई बर्बरता छिपी होगी. So from this poem we come down to what is a nation, Ernest Renan. But I think these lines from this poem very clearly explains both the concepts of nation and hybridity. As thinkers as early as Renan, that was in 1882, quite ahead of the time. Renan were aware nations are not natural entities, and the instability of the nation is the inevitable consequence of its nature as well as a social construction. Now, so nation is not something natural, but it is constructed, social construction, but it is so well internalized that we all believe that, well, nation is a natural entity. And we get connected with our nation very deeply, And then when we ask that, why am I connected with the nation so deeply? I'm going to live in this nation only 50, 70, 80 years only. It is not necessary that in my previous birth, if there was something like rebirth, I was born in this nation only. Or even in the next birth, I'm going to take birth only in this nation. It is not that connection. So when after we are born, we are surrounded by the language, and language constructs everything for us. It constructs the worldview. It gives us a world also. And in that language, there is a kind of a social constructivism. And there the concept of nation is being we can say internalized by us, by all the citizens, wherever they are, they all get. So it is not natural entity. This myth of nationhood, masked by ideology, perpetuates nationalism, in which specific identifiers are employed to create exclusive and homogeneous conceptions of national traditions. So now from nation you enter into more dangerous proposition, that is nationalism, into nationalism. Now, why this? You may also have a question that how is this connected with Midnight Children also? When Salim or Salman Rushdie is trying to tell a story about India, then they are looking at India in many such ways where you do not find this homogeneous conception of national traditions, that nation is to be seen in a particular way, with reverence. Like there is a concept of Bharat Mata. Bharat Mata, that is what is the concept. Now Salim's India or Rushdie's India is not at all Bharat Mata. Rather, it is a kind of a hodgepodge khichdi of such an identity that you may not have any reverence for that nation. It becomes irreverential. But why I expect a reverence towards a nation from me as well as from the others? Because of nationalism, and it has its own traditions. Exclusive, it creates exclusive and homogeneous conceptions of national traditions. Such signifiers of homogeneity always fail to represent the diversity of the actual national community for which they purport to speak, and in practice usually represent and consolidate the interest of the dominant hegemonic power groups within any national formation. So in the third point, it says that, well, you may talk nationalism and then traditions, where in those traditions you have to have reverence for the national identity, and everything that stands for nation is to be respected. That is what you keep on speaking. While that is happening, while these things are going on, while this community is building, at that time, this point is very important, that in practice, all these things usually represent and consolidate the interests of dominant power groups. Those people who are in power, their ideas, their way of looking at everything is getting consolidated, and their interests are normally seen as a part of nation formation or national formations also. So that this idea by Ernest Renan helps us to deconstruct the very notion of nationalism and national traditions, wherein we can say how the nation is to be seen or narrated also. And we remember that Salman Rushdie is doing this. He is not making nation something that is a space of reverence. Construction of nation and nation state. Now this concept from nationalism, national tradition, we go one step further, and that is nation state, a more dangerous proposition. Nation state. Constructions of the nation are thus potent sites of control and domination within modern society. So who is controlling and how they control? The very concept of nation becomes very important to be seen in this also. Now in the novel also we see that when the Prime Minister of India wanted to control and dominate over the society, she found that the challenges will come from whom? From the magical children, from the midnight children who have magical power. So you have to control them, you have to castrate them, you have to kill them. And that is what, without that, your construction of nation will not happen. This is further emphasized by the fact that the myth of a national tradition is employed not only to legitimize a general idea of a social group, that is a people, not all, a people, but also to construct a modern idea of a nation state in which, and these are very important words to differentiate nation and nation state, in which all the instrumentalities of state power, for example, military and police agencies, judiciaries, religious hierarchies, educational systems, and political assemblies or organizations are subsumed and legalized as the natural expression of a unified national history and culture. So that is where the formation of nation state we see. So whether it is obviously military and police agency will work, and they will obviously say that you are anti-national and there are laws and you will be imprisoned under the garb of your activities which are anti-national. So you may ask that what is this a nation? What is national? What is being national and what is being anti-national? So this all systems will work. They start working against you, and they start proving that what you are doing is wrong. Judiciary can also become a part of that. Religious hierarchies. Religion normally gets hand to hand with the people in the power. With people in the power, they will always try to maintain a good relation with people in the power. Otherwise, your religious hierarchies will be in trouble. So you will see a big religious gurus. They will very quickly join hands with the people in the power. They will rarely make any comments which are against ruling politicians. Educational systems also become part of that, political assemblies and everything. They subsume and legalized natural expressions of unified national history and culture there. And then this nation state starts controlling people through all kinds of institutions. All institutions are used to control over the people. So that is nation state. So many times you will see that people say that, well, still nation and nationalism is not problematic. But when nation state, when all the systems, all the institutions, or as Althusser has said, this word, that is ideological state apparatus, state apparatus. When all the state apparatus, judiciary, prison system, religious institutes, all these things work together for the people who are ruling against the people who are ruled, then this is problematic. This was exactly what the British Raj was doing. All institutions, all systems were supporting them. It was in support of, and people on the other side were wailing. People on the other side were crying. People on the other side said that no, we want equality. So that cry was then, that was that freedom struggle we call it as, and people were ready to die, getting imprisoned, brutalities, atrocities of people like General Dyer. They have taken bullets on their chests, and they also hanged. All those things happened because the entire system was working against you, against those people. But very importantly, it can be seen that even if there is no British Raj, and if this continues, if British Raj is not there or the outsider rulers are not there, but if this system continues, then what? Then are you still not colonized? Can you say you are living in a post-colonial world? Or can this all become something very important in a post-colonial time to question the thing? You started questioning colonial masters, and you studied all their instruments of atrocities, everything you studied, and you said, well, fair and good, Said's project, all things. But if you see the same thing still happening by the people whose skin color is different, it is like your skin color now. It is happening by them then. So then that becomes a very interesting post-colonial site, or that is where Salman Rushdie is situated, and that is where even Midnight's Children becomes very important as a post-colonial text. So the confusion of the idea of the nation with the practice and power of the nation state makes nationalism one of the most powerful forces in contemporary society. It also makes it an extremely contentious site on which ideas of self-determination and freedom, of identity and unity collide with ideas of suppression and force, of domination and exclusion. So ultimately, when we look back at the colonial masters and the freedom struggle, there was the major cry was good governance, Suraj, rather than Swaraj. But well, Swaraj also we want, political freedom also we want. But Suraj was the goal. So the ideas of self-determination and freedom, the ideas of identity and unity, if it starts colliding with ideas of suppression and force, of domination and exclusion, then it becomes an interesting side. So for Salim's enemy here is not a white person, but Salim visualizes somebody as an antagonist. Then it is the prime minister of his own country. His own country is that who wants to castrate the magical children, who wants to win over them. So that suppression, or that it may happen through the magical child also. She can become a part of those things also. So that how you voice the concept of nationalism, nation state, which you were questioning earlier. Now how you carry on with that becomes very interesting point for post-colonial studies. Timothy Brennan, which he connected this very idea of nationalism, which was unknown to the colonies. It was unknown to colonies, but the contact with European imperialism gave us this point. It gave us this idea also. Even though nationalism as an ideology came out of the imperialist countries, these countries were not able to formulate their own national aspirations until the age of exploration. The age of exploration, finding the new world, finding different space. So that is the Renaissance time. The markets made possible by European imperial penetration motivated the construction of the nation state at home. So markets outside, capital mode of colonialism, all goods are taken, raw material taken from colonies, and the goods sold in the colonies, the profit moving towards your own state. And then you require that idea that, well, where will the money go? If I am rich, where will I spend my money? I will invest in my country. I will invest in my country. So even if I am an NRI, non-residential Indian working in Canada or America, once I become rich, I get some surplus money, I will think to buy property in my country. So I will invest my money back home. So that is that idea. So you have something called as home, and you still, even though you are getting job in other land, you are working there, you get a space to perform, and yet you still crave for your home, that home. So that is where the rise, or you can say construction of the idea of nation state at home. And when you do that, people say it is good. It is good. You are doing something for your home nation. That is good. So you have all positive connotations being constructed with the idea of nation state, which are used to suppress the people also. European nationalism was motivated by what Europe was doing in its far-flung dominions. The national idea, in other words, flourished in the soil of foreign conquest. So that is what people time and again say, that India, country like India, actually was not having the idea about one nation. It was so many countries here. We know that Saurashtra had so many Rajwadas, They all, Bhavnagar was a state. Bhavnagar was a country in its own way. Gondal was a different state. Rajkot was a different state. Jamnagar was a state. Wakaner also was a state. Baroda was a state. So that way, and historically also, so many states were always there. All the kings were the ruler. People take us back to Mahabharata time and again. Mahabharata, because that word Mahabharata speaks about one country, one nation. And that's why even Bhagwat, Rawat, or all the writers tend to talk about Mahabharata. Because that gives us a reminder that, well, even in that Mahabharata also, it was Hastinapur that was ruled by Kurus, Kuru Vansh. There were so many other countries that were there. They were different state altogether. And you have to, like in World War I and World War II, so many European countries either came to the part of England or Germany. The same way, even that was, some went for Pandavas, some went for Kauravas. And then it became a kind of a world war. It became a kind of a world war, Kurukshetra. But all separate states were still existing as such there. And that's why we have this idea of Ashwamedh Yagna. Ashwamedh Yagna in Ramayana, Mahabharata. So a horse would go, and if anybody, any other country, any other king will dare to challenge that king, then he will catch the horse, and he will be be ready to fight with that king. So if the horse takes a round of everything, if everybody is under your dominion, then you are the ruler. You are the ruler, but you have to prove that. You have to prove that this is there. But it works only for a while. Then again, all the states are separated. As soon as the Chakravarti Raja becomes poor, weak, or he dies, all the states are again free states. So the very idea about one nation, large one nation idea is an imaginary space. It is nothing but an imaginary space. It's very interesting to see, even in imagination, there is a nation. Even in imagination, there is also nation. So the very idea that how nation is an imaginary space, because even in imagination, you have this. So the concept of imaginary communities, imaginary. So this is just an abstract idea, which is forced upon the people, and they are forced by judiciary, by legal system, by police force, and other kinds of things to follow those things. So people would say that if there is any national symbol is displayed, you have to give respect. So if national song is going on, you have to stand up. Now there is no rule as such. There is no rule. You can sit. Also, there is not. It's not that you have to stand. If you want to give respect, you stand up. It is good. It is good. But it is not compulsory that you have to give respect. But somebody will tell that no, if you are not giving respect, you are anti-national. We get a right to beat you. And when we know that when in cinema theaters, national anthem became compulsory, and if somebody was not standing up, then other people were beating that person, abusing, saying bad words to that person. So we question that what is it that gives right or that moral courage to that person to abuse the another person who is sitting when national anthem is going on? What gives that power? That power comes from this concept of nation state, nationalism, which is very dangerous thing to see also. But everything is European. Everything again comes from the European imperialism. Today we see that many of these laws, and we are still disputing about those things. And this is very recent. Today only it is reported that the colonial law of British Raj to suppress the freedom of people is there. It is still existing. This is that glaring example to see that how those laws and those rules, those concepts of nation state, which are helping the people in the power to dominate over their own people, they do not discard it. They do not remove it. So you remove white people. They tell us to hate white people. They tell us to hate their language. They tell us not to speak in English language. We are hardworking. They are hardword. They are hardword universities is not as good as hardworking people. All those discourses are given to us. But when it comes that why don't you remove this law? Then you say no, because it is helping you in propagating the very idea about nation state. So one of the plea is filed by Major General S.G. Wombatkere, who is retired here for this. And he says that this offense of sedition, Rajdroh, is wholly unconstitutional and should be unequivocally and unambiguously struck down. It should be removed. So yesterday in the court, in the Supreme Court, this was what Chief Justice of India, N.V. Ramanna, asked Attorney General K.K. Venugopal, who is representing Government of India, is asking to him that dispute is a colonial law and was used by British to suppress freedoms and used against Mahatma Gandhi, Bal Gangadhar Tilak. The question is pertinent. Is this law still needed after 75 years of independence? Yeah? Now that itself becomes interesting that, well, that's how this new governments, new people, they still want something that can help them to suppress. Well, in that capacity, obviously novel, or novelist has a role to play to tell people about such things also. The role of limited and biased versions of the past masquerading as national tradition has been attacked by many groups, including those who see these national traditions as limited in various ways by gender, religion, or ethnicity. In practice, it is hard to see how the nation can cease to be employed as a definitive political entity within which these integral heterogeneities and differences can be resolved. Perhaps the issue is not whether we have nations, but what kind of nations we have. Whether that is they insist on an exclusionary myth of national unity. Myth is what we call imaginary national unity, exclusionary, which excludes so many other people, based in some abstractions coming from an abstract idea, such as race, religion, or ethnic exclusivity, or they embrace plurality and multiculturalism. So if it embraces hybridity, multiculturalism, plurality, then that idea of nation is a good idea. Then there may not be a problem with that. But if you keep on making your judiciary, your legal system, your police system, everything in such a way that a particular kind of a nation is a nation, the other way is not there. So if you wear this kind of cloth, you are Desh Bhakta. If you speak this language, you are Desh Bhakta. If you eat this food, you are Desh Bhakta. This all ideas. So food, clothes, language, way of life, that all gets connected. And if you don't do that, if you say, I want to eat this, I want to wear this, I want to marry, divorce, remarry, then people will say, well, no, then you are anti-national. You are not behaving like what this country stands for. That is what they will start speaking in that language. Homi Bhabha writes in this Nation and Narration, wherein this becomes very interesting to see that how do we see this nation, in this concept. Then he gave this again another metaphor, that is modern Janus, Greek god Janus with dual face, something that looks forward and backward. So that concept he gave for nation, and he said that uneven development of capitalism inscribes both progression and regression, political rationality and irrationality in the very genetic code of the nation. It is very ambivalent. The very idea about nation is very ambivalent. This paragraph is very important, which you can find lots of examples even from Midnight's Children to support this. Nation is narrated. Nation is narrated. See, not in Janagana Mana or Vande Mataram or Bharat Mata Ki Jai. Not in that. Nation is narrated in terror of the space or race of the other. Capital O. Yes, race of the other. The comfort of social belonging. The hidden injuries of class, or here you can say caste also. The customs of taste. The powers of political affiliation. The sense of social order, the sensibility of sexuality, the blindness of bureaucracy, the straight insight of institutions, the quality of justice, the common sense of injustice, the lang of the law and the parole of the people. This lang and parole, we'll have to go back to structuralism, Ferdinand de Saussure, who gave this word for language, lang and parole. So he said how this language is narrated, terror of space, the other, comfort of social belonging. So if I am located in my society at a comfortable place, like I belong to a caste which the caste is respected, I am rich enough to be a good consumer in a consumerist society. I am of a good caste which is respected. I am doing a good job, so economically also I am respected because I am doing a job. A respected job. Now that all is the comfort of my social belonging. Now that perhaps will tell me that there is no problem with nation. Nobody is unhappy in this nation. Everybody is happy. See, I am happy, everybody is happy. So that also, and then we forget to see hidden injuries of class, of rich and poor divide, of have and have nots, or of caste distinctions. And then we forget to see, or we are unable to see those things also. So that this all makes for a nation, and in a way everything is captured by by Salman Rushdie in the narration of Nation in Midnight's Children. Again, he writes, Homi ke Bhabha, it is to explore the Janus-faced ambivalence of language itself in the construction of the Janus-faced discourse of the nation. We need to see the language which is utilized or used in a significant way. When I shared this blog with you to do the task on Shashi Tharoor's Era of Darkness, at the bottom there was one video in Hindi also. In Hindi, if you have watched that video, then you will understand this ambivalence of language, that how a particular language is used to thrust the ideas about nation and nationality on the people. It looks so good also, very convincing also at times it looks. I will come back to this point. Just remember this point, ambivalence of language and how it gets manipulated in different ways. If you remember, a few days back, I shared one video in WhatsApp group, and that video was where Amitabh Bachchan is talking about language and the errors of pronunciating the words. And he said that champagne or this dharma, the word dharma, not dharma, yoga, and he's making that because of hundreds of years of being colonized, we are speaking their words correctly, but they will not speak our words correctly. That was that. But that language is very problematic language. That language, because champagne is a very French word, and we were not a colony of France. We were not a colony of France. So when we try to look at the language, we find that there's lots of problem. And but it is constructing a kind of an idea of nation, that I should love my nation, and so what should I do? I should speak their language in a bad manner, and I should show disrespect towards their language. That is what it tries to say. Now that is problematic idea for the nation state idea, or narrating a nation. If that is how the nation is narrated continuously, then what happens to us is that we become the being of hatred. We are poisoned to hate those people. And then even if there is some good person whose skin is white and he is speaking English language, then I will start hating that person also, without even checking whether he is a good or bad person. I will start hating because this language is making putting venom into me. Nation is an agency of ambivalent narration that holds culture at its most productive position. So culture is very important in this, and subordination and the force for subordination, fracturing, diffusing, reproducing, as much as producing, creating, forcing, and guiding also. The ambivalent antagonistic perspective of nation as narration will establish the cultural boundaries of the nation so that they may be acknowledged as containing thresholds of meaning that must be crossed, erased, and translated in the process of cultural production. So he said, once you get into this antagonist perspective will give us thresholds of meaning, but those thresholds are to be crossed. It must be erased, or it has to be translated in the process of cultural production. So if we remain within the thresholds, threshold can also be known as Lakshman Rekha. And we know that how problematic is that concept of Lakshman Rekha also, which obviously is drawn by Lakshman, who is a man, for a woman who is Sita, and it was instructed to remain inside Lakshman Rekha. But somehow the story goes that she came outside and she was abducted. And then the entire tragedy fall upon everybody. So you said that, well, because the women did not obey, because that women did not obey the man, everything bad happened. So women should obey the man and should remain within Lakshman Rekha. Obviously in Valmiki's Ramayana there is no Lakshman Rekha. It is later interpolation that is done in the other retellings. But this Lakshman Rekhas are to be crossed, it are to be erased and translated in the process of cultural production. So what kind of cultural space is the nation with its transgressive boundaries and its interruptive interiority? And well, we find that, well, Salim's India is like this. Salim's India is a very liquid India. It is like that running nose that India is this. It is trying to erase some boundaries. It is going into something. It is like becoming of a chutney of everything. It is something that is pickled into something. That is how it is been seen in that context. Then after nation, the idea of hybridity, and again this comes from Homi ke Bhabha's book, The Location of Culture, 1994 book, The Location of Culture, where he gave this concept of hybridity in post-colonial discourse. One of the most widely employed and most disputed terms in post-colonial theory, hybridity, commonly refers to the creation of a new transcultural forms within the context zone produced by colonization. So cross-cultural breeding, that is a very important point of hybridization. As used in horticulture, the word is coming from horticulture, means bagayat, vignan. Bagayat means gardening, and we know we are aware about Kesar Keri, Kesar mango. Kesar mango is a hybrid product. It is a hybrid product. So two different types of mangoes, they are grafted together. Their branches are grafted, and that all become part of horticulture. They are grafted together, and then what we get is Kesar. So Kesar mango is a very good example of this, that hybridity gives sweetness. If you see Deshi Keri, then it will not be as sweet as Kesar Keri. But Kesar is not pure form; it is a hybrid form. So the word is coming from horticulture, grafting of branches of different these trees, so that you get hybrid trees there. The term refers to the crossbreeding of two species by grafting or cross-pollination to form a third hybrid species. Hybridization takes many forms: linguistic also, cultural also, political, racial. Linguistic examples include Pidgin and Creole, and even Mikhail Bakhtin talk about this idea there. But we are right now interested in Homi ke Bhabha's idea about hybridity. The term hybridity has been most recently associated with the work of Bhabha, whose analysis of colonizer-colonized relations stresses their interdependence, and the mutual construction of their subjectivities. So this point is very important. Now see, so in this concept what we find is that you are not only anti-colonial in post-colonial time, you may be anti-colonial, empire rights back, but the entire energy of post-colonial discourse is not vested only in hating white people or whatever was the English tradition. It is not, the entire energy is not vested only in that. But they are trying to read something else, that when these two cultures merge together, colonizer, colonizing, whatever relations, master-slave relations or whatever, but it also gave chance to both of them to grow, They also enhance themselves by Eastern knowledge systems. And we have seen that transcendentalism, the movement in America, and then so many poets were highly influenced by Indian Upanishad and Ved and the knowledge system, and very famous writers like T.S. Eliot, the poems like The Westland, glaring example. So there is interdependence, mutual constructions, both are gaining. That is also an important part in hybridity. Bhabha contends that all cultural statements and systems are constructed in a space that he calls the third space of enunciation. Cultural identity always emerges in this contradiction, an ambivalent space, which for Bhabha makes the claim to a hierarchical purity of cultural untenable. For him, the recognition of this ambivalent space of cultural identity may help us to overcome the exoticism of cultural diversity in favor of the recognition of an empowering hybridity within which cultural differences may operate. So this is the empowering hybridity, celebrate hybridity. The cultural differences should be operated, and we go slowly and steadily away from that oneness kind of an idea. The Desh, which has lots of variety, the rainbow variety of Desh country remains, sustains, rather than the oneness of Rashtra is imposed upon everybody. Hybridity has frequently been used in past post-colonial discourse to mean simply cross-cultural exchange. But it is not only that. It is not only cross-cultural exchange and what happened, but it also tries to see something more under the concept of hybridity. This use of the term has been widely criticized since it usually implies negating and neglecting the imbalance and inequality of the power relations it references. So that is also very important. When we see mutual, but at the same time, what are the power relations? And how it was also creating imbalance and inequality, that also is to be seen. Remember the other day we were talking about the language, that if the lesser the people are using the language, we say that language is dying, language is minority, language is in the process of becoming inferior and other things. But when then they say that, well, with Sanskrit, there is some different thing. So if somebody is speaking Sanskrit language, it is not considered as inferior. That person is rather revered, is considered as superior. Why? Even though there are less people and with the Sanskrit, and people have to make an attempt for the survival of Sanskrit language, and yet Sanskrit is still the language of the elite, is still the language of the power. So even if the few people speak Sanskrit language, it will still not, it will still be powerful. So that is very important relation. Otherwise, it will be imbalance and inequality that you will see. So on the other side, somebody coming from village and he's not able to speak proper Gujarati also. The words like sa, cha, ho are confused in its speaking. So how are you going to look at that person? And you will find more number of people speaking language in that way than the people speaking Sanskrit language. But still our reverence is to the less speakers of Sanskrit language, and we see inferiorly towards these people who are speaking commonly the language there. That is the imbalance, and that might happen in all these relations when hybridity takes place, which also is to be seen in a proper context. By stressing the transformative cultural, linguistic, and political impacts on both the colonized and the colonizer, it has been regarded as replicating assimilationist policies by masking or whitewashing cultural differences. The another side of the thing, which obviously happened when you are a colonized and when you are free now. At that time, under the name of anti-colonialism or to disregard what was the masters were doing, it may happen that there is whitewashing of cultural differences. And that also is to be resisted. So, for example, somebody says coming in India, which is pluralistic society, and wants to say that, well, see, France has a French language, see, Spain has a Spanish language, see, Japan has a Japanese language, England has English language, and we don't have any language. When they rhetorically ask, then suddenly we feel that, oh, we don't have any language, we should have one language. And then say that, well, Hindi should be. So large number of people will agree with Hindi. A large number of people will agree, yes, Hindi should be our one language. We should be non-Hindustan, Hindi, Hindu, religion, language, nation, everything should become one, the same. No India. India should not should become one. At that time, suddenly we find somebody will say, what about my Tamil language? And then what we'll do? We start hating those people. If we are a part of this North India, then suddenly we start looking towards the voice of resistance, and we say that, well, these are anti-national voices. But that is where, so we should not be whitewashed, that if there is plurality, if we have so many languages, why we want one national language? Why can't all languages become national languages? Why all languages? So why can't we say with sense of pride that you have only one language? We have so many languages. Why should we not have that narration that so many languages is good? Bilingualism is better than monolingualism. Multiple language, multilingualism is far better than bilingualism. That is where one has to move on. Otherwise, whitewashing can happen under this culture for the cultural differences. So hybridity, in this article, Sarah Habib Bounds writes a very interesting point in this article, which we have shared through our website also. This article where you find very interesting examples to connect this hybridity and post-coloniality, formal, social, and historical innovations in Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children. And Sarah Habib tries to see these things with the same concept of hybridity and nation that we have seen earlier. It tries to read this Midnight Children's importance and significance as a post-colonial text arises from the novel's ability to intervene three major themes: the creation and telling of story, then creation and telling of nations and individuals' identity, and third, creation and telling of stories, history, nations, and individuals' identity, and telling stories there. Within these three connected themes, the novel explores the problems of post-coloniality depicted in the novel as the difficulties in assigning one's point of personal or national origin, the problems in determining one's personal and national history, and the impossibility of finding and achieving personal and national authentic identity. The novel expresses these themes of the creation and telling of history, identity, which is individual as well as nation's identity, and stories, while simultaneously introducing the problems of post-colonial identity through connected and dependent forms of hybridity also. So these are the points through which we can study, and very interesting examples we can find from this novel about hybridity, nation, and how creating and telling stories, because Salim is creating the story and he is telling the story to Padma. Both the things simultaneously he is doing. He is creating the story and telling the story to Padma, who is the Nati. He is a Sutradhar. And Sutradhar is telling the stories to Nati. And in that, he is inventing his own identity, he is looking for his own identity, he is connecting himself with nation, so nation's identity also. In that, while telling the nation, you are talking about history of nation. You are telling that this happened, that happened, and you are interviewing parallel that with my growth, the nation also is growing. I was 10 years old, my nation also was 10 years old. And you are connecting yourself constantly with the history of the nation, and everything becomes a story. That history also is a story. So that becomes very interesting part, that even the metafiction, meta narrative of history also gets challenged from a fictionalizing of history in this, and it becomes metafiction also. So it's a novel, and there are comments on the novel also in between. The part which is excluded from cinema, a very interesting part of the novel which is excluded in cinema, is this, that Salim tells a story and Padma comments on that, and then Salim explains why I tell it in this way. So it is becoming metafiction. So you are writing a novel and you are also commenting on your story or your own novel also. So that aspect which was not considered in the film, but it makes a very interesting part from post-colonial angle to see the hybridity and the nation in this novel also. So I hope this might clarify both the things. In post-colonial studies paper also, you get a clarity of idea, and in Indian English literature, post-independence, there also you get a better understanding of this novel also. So simultaneously in both the units, we are dealing that post-colonial studies and also Midnight's Children. So, well, in case any question from either of the way, either of the side, either post-colonial side or Midnight's Children as an Indian English literature, literary text written in post-independence time. If you have any doubt or question, you can ask. Yes, anybody, any doubt, any chat question if you have, then you can ask a question. Okay, so it seems that we don't have any questions. So then let me stop the recording here. Okay.